Ben Lyttleton, author of 12 Yards, the leading authority on penalties. Welcome.
Thank you, Steve. Good to be here and good to talk to you.
There was no one else I could really talk to this week after everything that's gone on. Obviously, the United narrative has been heavily punctuated by penalties. You've got Bruno missing at Fulham. You've got everything that happened at Grimsby, and then the full redemptive arc for Bruno against Burnley at the weekend. So it's a happy ending, but it wasn't so happy on the way there. Let's get to that. What were your takeaways from the whole sort of sequence of events?
Well, I think there's a big difference between what happens in a penalty shootout and what happens in open play penalties. And, they are different scenarios. I think one you can plan for in great detail, and one tends to be whoever's, feeling good on the day and is the main penalty taker. And the context of the match is obviously very, very important. When it was the Fulham penalty, we obviously heard Bruno moan afterwards about the referee knocking into him and that distracting him or somehow affecting him. But there are lots of distraction techniques that goalkeepers use on penalty strikers, penalty shooters, and the experienced and talented and prepared penalty strikers will then reset. They will take an extra second, redo their routine. Essentially, the penalty kick is executing a task under pressure. And when you're under pressure and stressed, you tend to rush. You want to get it over with quickly. And if something goes wrong, you just tend to, go through with it extremely quickly. Whereas if you are cold-blooded and calm, and normally Bruno is, he's proved himself a clutch penalty taker in the past, then you reset and you go again. And there's no rule on when you can take the penalty. The referee blows the whistle, but that's just to say the shooter can kick whenever they are ready. And Bruno had the opportunity to wait as long as he wanted. And don't forget the Leno factor as well. Fulham did beat Manchester United in a penalty shootout earlier this calendar year, I guess you could say, even though it was
Yeah.
last season. These little things just can play a role. The context of the situation around the club at that time, having played well in the first game but getting 0 points, all these things. A penalty is like a unique snapshot of what's going on at a player and at a club's moment in time. And I think we really saw that come to life in the Grimsby game as well, because that was an encapsulation really of, I guess you could say, the last 12 months of United, or maybe you'd say the last 12 years. But it was a moment where there could have been redemption. They were one kick away from winning the shootout. Cunha was chosen to take the fifth penalty. He's only taken two penalties for Wolves in his time there. I was quite surprised at that. I thought he'd have taken more. And what I was more surprised about, and I'm sure many United fans would agree, was where was Seshko? This is a guy who was RB Leipzig's first choice penalty taker last season, first choice penalty taker for his country. He scored 11 out of 11 penalties in open play.
Right.
So I was surprised to not see him not only in the top five, but kicking 10th was really a sign that they were trying to protect him from something, or maybe he wasn't backing himself. But I felt that the club or the people who were deciding the order weren't backing him. And that in itself sends a message.
I
And
believe there was
not
a
necessarily a positive
sorry to
message.
jump in. There was a little bit of mitigation. I think he had it was I think it was cramp. It was written off as.
Well, we don't know the whole story. And if that is the case, then that is totally fair. That is,
Yeah,
then
yeah.
he should be taking
But
10th.
still, it's a very valid
Yeah,
question,
well,
isn't it?
no. If he's saying I'm not 100%, then that's a totally fair response, and therefore I hold my hands up. And also, we don't know what's going on in that chat between the final whistle and the penalties being taken. We don't know who's putting their hands up, who is asking to take penalties, or more importantly, who the coach is saying should take this penalty. Because one of the things I always tell clubs that I work with as a penalty coach is that it's the coach's responsibility to choose the players and the order in which they take penalties, not the player's responsibility. And I've seen this before with United when they lost a shootout to Middlesbrough, I think it was, in the Carabao. I
Happened a
distinctly
couple of
remember
times.
players putting their hands up saying, I'll go, I'll go. And the coach basically abdicating responsibility from that process. And when I see that happening, I always fear the worst for that team because it smacks to me of a lack of preparation.
Just in advance, just to hone in on kind of the psychology and the pressure angle. When ahead of that shootout, when it's finished 2-2 and you know it's penalties, as an expert, are you sat there thinking, nah, the pressure's going to be too much for United here. It's even if you win, you're going to get slated. Whereas Grimsby, it's you can't lose.
Well, there are two ways of looking at that, Steve, and that is one way of looking at it. But the United players are used to pressure. I mean, these are guys who, play for their country. Harry Maguire scored a penalty shootout for England in in an important match. Um, Pressure comes easier to them than the 18-year-old playing his first big game for Grimsby, who's never
Mm.
been on TV before and probably never played in front of a full stadium. So there are two ways of looking at it. Yes, the Grimsby players would go into that shootout saying we've done really well, we've got nothing to lose. No one's expecting us to win this anyway, which is a great um, attitude to go in with. Um, but the studies show that if you have scored the last goal before the shootout, that you are more likely to go on and win the shootout because there is a momentum factor. And the fact that
Right.
that goal came in the 89th minute or 90th minute or very late goal, most teams are totally deflated by by conceding that goal. Their heads drop, and you often see teams that score late equalizers to go into a shootout, go on and win that shootout. That didn't happen in this case because maybe the balance of the momentum, weighed up against the balance of the nothing to lose attitude, counted against them. But these are kind of marginal elements that go into winning or losing. Onana got a fist to at least three penalties and couldn't keep them out. Cunha, as I say, had the chance to win it. And Bumo has scored 10 out of 11 penalties in his career and very rarely misses and then missed it second time round. So these are fine margins, but I do feel that if you're not preparing for them, then your chances of failure are greater.
Just to focus on Bruno as kind of the central figure in the whole thing. Obviously, he missed at Fulham, then came back and scored his kick twice over, did his job twice over. And then you go into the Burnley game, and once again it comes down to a penalty shootout. I mean, as you say, he is usually very, very dependable in these situations. He's a clutch penalty taker. But in terms of pressure, knowing everything that rides on that moment, even down to going up against Martin Dubravka, who he trained against, who will have a little bit of inside info, I can't imagine many more pressurized situations in a regular league game.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about high pressure, when you're trying to get a home win against Burnley on the third game of the
Yeah,
season, I mean, that is again the context of where United fans are right at this moment in time. But
yeah,
you're absolutely right. I think if that doesn't go in, it becomes a very long 2 weeks international break for you guys. But he's got to back himself. Like the guy is a top player. We know that. He is, the key player in this United side. He has the trust of the coach. And that's another key thing. I often ask coaches, if your star player misses a penalty one week, what are you going to do the week after? And some would say I'd switch it out and change to another player. And I think those that have the best relationships with their key players say I trust the player because you can miss a penalty. We're all human and a penalty can be missed. So the fact that he stuck with him and in the intervening 7 days or the next 7 days he scored three penalties out of three shows that the coach is right to put his faith in this player when it comes to scoring big penalties from the spot.
brilliant. Ben, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks a lot. And if United do need a penalty coach, you know where I am.
I don't think it's an if.